Hi everyone, my name is Gavin Henry of SureVoIP, and I'm going to talk to you today about building the SureVoIP app. I started this around May this year, sort of just into the start of lockdown. I built a similar app, well, a basic app last year called SureVoIP Notify for getting push notifications on any type of device, uh, version of Android rather than iOS. So you can get push notifications for any of your SureVoIP services. And that was useful because it goes right down to Android 6. And this year's been spent building a fully unified video calling chat app that I'm going to take you through. So who am I? I'm Gavin Henry, Managing Director of SureVoIP. I'm 42. Been doing this now since 2005 when I left the company I worked for as a graduate engineer, doing electronics and communications. I've been paying myself since sort of August 2005. I have one son, Ben. He's just turned 16 this year. He's very disabled and sort of drives all the architecture and infrastructure of the company because we overspend on resilience. We're in two different locations of the UK. I'll take you through. And obviously, we don't want to be disturbed. We don't want our customers to be disturbed. He sleeps really badly, so we don't want to be woken up. And that's been working really well for us since the 1st of March 2014. We've been independent. Prior to starting SureVoIP in 2010, or the brand name, I was doing open source IT consultancy for all companies, councils, so you name it. And really sort of discovered my love of software, and that's what I mostly do now is write all the software that sticks it all together, the glue, as it were. This is also my second year of being a podcast host for Software Engineering Radio. That took me 2 years to get on, and it's one of the top 5 software engineering podcasts in the world. It's run by the IEEE. We're all volunteers. We just do it because we love it, and the level of people we get access to is amazing. In fact, if you go to my profile, my feed on se-radio.net, you can see exactly what I've been working on throughout the year, which will really complement what we're talking about here today. I interviewed Justin Richer on OAuth 2 API security, which is a fundamental part of this app that we've built. Neil Madden on securing your API, which is really, really, really interesting. Abhinav, the CEO of Postman, on designing APIs for yourself and for consumers of that API. In particular, because of this app, Matt Lacey on mobile app usability. I'm forgetting my words today, apologies. And it's not out yet, but I just interviewed Tim Lacey of product manager of Flutter and Dart, which is what powers this app. And then in a couple of weeks, I'm interviewing Nigel Bolton, who wrote the Kubernetes book. So that's the next thing we're kind of working on internally. Although we are and have been running Docker Swarm between our two sites for many years now, driven by GitLab, CI, CD, and all the usual things, playbooks, Ansible. Fantastic. Right, so moving on. Hang on. So what are my current services? We're a company of 7, 2 locations. We have hosted VoIP spread across the sites, bog standard SIP trunks with all the usual frills. DDIs, we have about 1.5 million of our own numbers. We have SS7 interconnects in Edinburgh and London. We do occasional on-site PBX support for some of the bigger companies. We have our own interconnects with different providers to provide Ethernet to our hotel customers and various customers that need the best internet connection really into our network. And we do the hardware and provisioning for the phones. I think I've messed up the diagrams here. Excuse excuse me. That's our core network. So we've got Edinburgh, fully resilient, links, tier 1 transit, public peering in there, and even more in London. London was upgraded, all the core stuff, start of the year. And Edinburgh we're probably going to do next year. Just delayed that a bit. I'm just going to drop this video out until we need it. So this is the app. It is fully sort of cloud safe, as it were. There's a client. You authenticate to a great OAuth 2 provider and OpenID connect provider called Hydra by I think you pronounce it O-R-Y. I've got a link for it. That's a fantastic sort of container Go driven written application that you can deploy wherever. Really fast, really good. We then take you into our portal to authenticate, do the OAuth 2 dance, get the tokens, and then everything we need is saved on the device in secure storage on iOS and Android. I forgot to mention that the whole point of this app is we do already provide soft phones, but it's just not integrated. You know, you can't go onto it and see all your analytics, set your numbers, get your billing things, just, you know, a proper primary app that we can control ourselves. I wrote every bit of it, so we know. I'll keep saying we. I know every line of code. Allows us to skin it. You know, we could do it for our partners, control everything, and integrate how we want to, rather than just brand up someone else's app. So that's the App Store, the Apple version. So what's involved? So we've got Flutter, which is Google's framework, really coming on leaps and bounds. It came out in around 2017-ish. I started playing with it in 2019. They're investing heavily in it. It's come on so much this year. And basically, it's not JavaScript, which is awesome. It's Dart, which has been around for a long time now. It's a rendering engine, effectively, and that engine is what runs natively on Android and iOS, and then it paints the screen and you're in control of every pixel, and build method for how to display things. It uses a thing, so more of this if you want to listen. I think in January the show, next month the show with Tim Sneath will come out about all of this. We talk about the infrastructure of architecture of Flutter, sorry. So basically, it speaks to the native side of Android and iOS through method channels, and then you can't really get away when you get to the level that I'm doing this app at without touching native code and potentially writing your own plugins. I'll get on to more of the difficulties in that and some of the issues we've hit. And the holy grail here is that you write your code once, and there's a few toggles to say, if this is running on the web, on the desktop, but by and large, it's one code base, one or two pipelines to build it. You plug in Fastlane to deploy it to the app stores. So you'll have a web version or a web app. You have native iOS and Android, and you have desktop versions. They just released Windows, Linux and Mac, although you can run iOS apps now on Mac OS with Big Sur just out. So what you've got there is you're breaking away from the world of your React Native or your Vue.js sort of web app, your JavaScript thing to make it reactive and fast. Your native Android or iOS using something like React Native, which is JavaScript, so that's all right. And then Electron again, potentially for your desktop versions, which by and large is 3 different code bases. and that's why I love Flutter, because there's no JavaScript involved, and it's just the tooling for it is just so good. Hot reload, hot refresh. It's just been invested in a lot, and it's very nice to work with. So really, to do anything call-wise on a device, you can't have it sitting zip registering all the time or connecting to the back ends. The operating system will shut it down, so you need to really send the device a push message. To do it properly on Android, you really need to use the Firebase cloud messaging. There are other push things there, but they all use that, and it's really well integrated with the operating system. And that also works on iOS for general notifications for what you see pop up. But when you get into the backgroundy stuff to wake up your app, Firebase Cloud Messaging version 7, which is the latest, 8 is beta, isn't doing background messages properly. There's tons of posts on it, kind of works, but it doesn't really. To do it properly on iOS, you have to use the push kit, which wakes up your app. But with iOS 13, which we're now into 14, you have to use their call kit framework, so you can instantly display the native sort of call look and feel framework on an iPhone or iPad. You're not allowed to use PushKit without using it for VoIP. So you can't use it for background messages on chat services, although it seems when you dig into this, apps like WhatsApp, other ones seem to have like a flag they're allowed to use and just use it for push. I guess it depends on how big you are, but by default you have to use PushKit and CallKit. Obviously, if you listen to a bit of the podcast I did with Justin Richer, mobile devices, you don't want to store any secrets on it, so there's ways in OAuth 2 with Pixie, it's called, so you kind of validate who what the app is and who it's pretending to be, and then you get your tokens, your access token, refresh token, and your OpenID token. Keep those on the device, but encrypt them with iOS keychains or Android keychains, and Flutter Secure Storage plugin sort of wraps all of that. We then take that token and speak directly to our API, which then speaks to Hydra, which is the OAuth 2 provider, and OpenID Connect provider. And then you get kind of a nice session in the API that you can go and say, here's a token from the client. You send it to the provider, and it gives you anything that you want that you've stored in from the authentication session, i.e. the dance where the person authorizes the app to access their account, which is done on our portal. And then for user feedback and error reporting, so if there's any type of crash or exception, that instantly gets sent to Sentry.io with what line of code and what function or method generated it. We send along metadata which says, what device it was, what version it was of the operating system, just everything you'd expect in production. And then this all really came from the podcast I did with Matt Lacey, 12 things every app should do, and that's allow a user to do and provide feedback, not just through reviews on the App Store. So Wiredash is a great service which is Flutter only. It allows you to take a screenshot, draw on the screen. That sends it, the user can then click send. That comes through with the screenshot, loads of other metadata specific to that device that you need to troubleshoot the issue. And that's working really well. So we released the app to the app stores about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Not fully announced it to customers. Our close partners and customers that follow us on all the social media are on it. We've still got a little issue to sort out with inbound calls on iOS, which I'll touch on later, but everything else on Android's fine. And then a bit of infrastructure change before we announce it. But yeah, it's been, what's that, May, June, July, August, about 7 months of just pure fun and just thinking, is this something I should be doing? But you know when you're doing something right and you really enjoy it that you should be doing it. We'll grow a small team around it and maybe get, outsource a little bit later, but there's certain things you just have to do yourself at sometimes in your life, and this was one of them. So I'm just going to change the slide. Bit unprofessional with this, flicking through windows, but hey. So what else is in the tech stack? So AppAuth, which is the sort of guidance framework, SDKs for doing OAuth 2 on public clients. Highly recommend it. It's takes a bit of working to do to get it right, but once it's done, you can sort of chill out. That means you've got full access to your own API through the client, done safely and securely. You're probably wondering, Open LDAP, what's LDAP doing in this type of stuff? In 2020. Open LDAP is something I've been a consultant for since 2004. It is the fastest directory server in the world. It'll do, hundreds of thousands of seconds searches per second. Sort of what you'd call strictly typed because there's a schema for every attribute in the directory. So you imagine like a Redis key value, every key and every value has a certain type controlled by the schema, sort of like XML. Very fast, I know it inside out. It's multi-mast, geographically replicated. We've got 2 in each of our locations. Just the access control lists, everything is fantastic. That powers all of our authentication, authorization. We provision this app from it, so the SIP credentials are stored in there. Everything's encrypted. Passwords are in there, all to the latest standards. Just really, really nice. So that's what happens when you switch on the app. It goes and checks everything, whether the service is enabled, all that type of stuff. OpenSIPs 3.1 is sitting in front of our sort of core SIP proxies, and that runs as a mid-registrar. So that sits in front of all of our VoIP kit, all of our hosted VoIP kit, does the high scaling registrations and then trickles them out to our hosted PBX stack, does loads of other stuff. But 3.1 comes with RFC 8599, which is the push-based. I'll look at what the title is, but basically it's a way of managing and adding your push tokens in with the SIP contacts. So basically, when your client registers to the proxies, it sends along with it in the contact headers its token and how you can reach it. So the SIP side saves that along with who the SIP client is, and then it will send a push to wake up the client. It expects a register back, or it depends how you configured it, to say, yeah, I'm here, and then it'll send an invite and off you trot. There's obviously a lot more to it than that, and to implement it spot on, it's a bit tricky because certain SIP stacks want to wake up all the time, and you can't get a registration expiration back. So long story short is basically set, the trick of it is to set a long expiry time because you're supposed to send a push, I think it's 150 seconds before it expires or 2 minutes. And you don't want to be doing that all the time because when a push comes in on iOS, you have to show, so you use PushKit to wake up the app and then you have to show the native caller. So you can't show that if you're just waking up an app. So you only need that token on the first registration. It doesn't change unless the app's removed, but you can detect a change on the client side and send it again, so it's saved. Of course, we wouldn't be an ITSP without having FreeSwitch in the pot. Been using that since 2009. That's fantastic. That does all the web RTC stuff, radio. Kudos to the SignalWire guys. This whole thing has been designed so we can, as it scales, put OpenSIPs in front of our SIP stack in a cloud, hybrid cloud, break it apart, we could put bits of this with SignalWire as it grows. It's really flexibly built. So we're using SIP over WebSockets with our WebRTC media. That kind of gets around all of the SIP issues because you're just speaking HTTPS, well, secure WebSockets, gets through all the NAT stuff, gets through any type of SIP ALG because they don't see it, and it's encrypted immediately. The great thing about WebRTC is that it's all encrypted, and we're using the Opus codec as you should be to give us that flexibility and quality. So you may be thinking, why the heck are we building, or am I building a mobile app? You're crazy. Well, I specialize in building and sticking things together. So I see that app, the client app, as sticking together everything we've got. I'm not crazy enough to build a PBX, leave that to the FreeSwitch guys, but our PBX stuff is kind of speaking to the APIs of FreeSwitch. So again, that's glue. I'm not crazy enough to do our own SIP stack. So what I did there was sponsor porting JS SIP, which is a fantastic project. We use that in our portal as well, over to Dart. That's completely open source, as you can see there. That came out around December, January 2020. It's already got tons of people using it, way more than I ever expected. And yeah, it's amazing how that's come on. We sponsored, or I put in the RFC 85999 stuff myself, 99999 stuff myself. There's been a lot of work of it over the past 2 weeks to do with background messaging and the call keep sort of framework. Those that use React Native will be familiar with that. That's the bit that wraps speaking to the connection service on Android and CallKit on iOS to basically tell the phone that you're in a phone call and do things properly on the native devices to say or show the native dialer on your phone. So it informs the operating system that there's a call going on and you can swap all the things you'd expect for a proper app, a professional one. So none of that was simple. None of it was easy. The whole way along, I was questioning whether it's something I should be doing. But then once you get that bit done, it's, I think most of us go through this imposter syndrome, but then you've got to give yourself a break and realize that you do know what you're doing. And you've got high integrity, high quality standards, and you do your tests, all that type of stuff. And then you go, yeah, I do know what I'm doing and it's working. But I'll take you now onto the difficulties of all that. Let me just switch over. You can see my ugly face. So Flutter is into its third year. It is very, very popular. If you look at the stars on GitHub, it's in the top 3, I think now, maybe top 5. I've already gibbered on about how cool it is and how good it is. I've had an app using it for about a year. I really rate it, but in the VoIP world, it's all pretty new. So like I said, we sponsored the first SIP stack in it. The push kit and call kit, there's a couple of plugins on pub.dev to pub.dev, which is the plugin thing like npm or cpan for Perl and all these types of places. But pushkit and callkit, they're basically being forked over from React Native, and a lot of stuff hasn't been implemented. So we've been working through that, and there's a framework plugin called CallKeep on pub.dev, which we've been using in bug reporting, paying for things that aren't there. That's really good. But the major problem that I've spent weeks on is background messages with Firebase Cloud Messaging. Now the way that works on Android, it works, but in Dart, it's got threading support, which is they're called isolates, which is a thread basically. and the background messages runs in its own thread, so it doesn't speak to anything that's already running or in the foreground. So you basically have to do everything twice. There's a few things that I missed, and then we sponsored another bit where we do like message passing between the front and the back, and that's working really nicely now. That's done. iOS in a lot of ways is boring and easy, but it has to be done exactly right. So I'm using a new push kit and call kit framework. So there's a slight bug in the call kit one, which is the last bit to get nailed before we announce it to customers. I'll probably get that done next week, but that's working well. With the previous plugin that I use, I've just changed it because what you'll all know in the open source world is you need to be working with responsive developers. They can't just release something and go. So I had a couple of issues with a project, a framework library that we picked. They've kind of disappeared. So I sponsored this again, and now we've got an active framework for the background stuff. RFC 599 is great on paper, but in reality, you have to do a few changes and tweaks. You can't do it exactly like it says in the RFC because it just doesn't work for a general user, and because Apple want a push message to immediately show the call native screen. So you can't do what it says in the RFC, which is to send a push to get the app to re-register and do things that way. The other major challenges were how the app should look, how it should feel. Flutter's continuous integration, continuous deployment is all kind of new, as in the cloud source code repositories are all kind of new with it. There's various different ones. GitHub brought out Actions, which is what I've switched to, and that works well. But you pay per minute for your tests, so that can be a bit tricky sometimes. We'll probably pull it back into our own infrastructure soon. And then with any application, whether it's desktop, back end, front end, client side, you have to manage state. So some piece of thing on the screen changes, you have to repaint the screen, you have to react, you have to pop up something, you need to have a state machine for it or something. That's all built in. But as with most open source stuff, or even proprietary stuff, there's several choices. I went through the ones that were in the books I bought and finally fell in love with something called GetX, which is one of the top plugins now. Great guys, chat rooms are brilliant, real clever people behind it, and it just works very well. It's kind of the MCV model view controller type style, but it's got reactive programming, it's got simple, it's got everything you need. It's a complete joy to work with. So if you're doing anything on Flutter, I would go for that first. Obviously, iOS 14 came out, that broke a lot of stuff. That's not fun, but the major broken thing in Flutter at the moment, which is Google's top priority, is slick animations on iOS. So phones have graphic processing units to render stuff. Android, you can run the app in development mode, touch the screen, play with it, and basically it'll record any animation that it's had to do and save that when you click save and warm them up when the app comes up. So instead of you getting what's called jank, where the screen flickers and you do the same action a couple of times and then the GPU knows what you're trying to do and it makes it all slick, you can warm up the Flutter apps with that, with a file when you build your app to get it on the app stores and release it. That's nailed on Android, so if you download and search SureVoIP on Google Play, the animations are lovely. On iOS, if you go into the App Store and download it, they'll clunk for 2 or 3 touches and then they're slick. So by the time we get it out properly for customers in maybe a couple of weeks, well, it's out there now, but when we do our blog post and mail shot, that'll be slick as well. So that was a major issue. So much so that some people aren't even releasing apps on iOS with animations because it's just bad. But But yeah, that's the whirlwind of app development. Um, Last year I did an app. I've got all the kit for it. Um, the hardest real bit is making it look nice. Um, so we outsourced the design for that. I'm happy with that. And now it's just getting out to customers and then sort of completing the dream of all the add-ons, the integrations. This week I've been working on HubSpot integration. So when you're in a call or you're doing something, you can just flick it up and it speaks to the HubSpot API. Just all these bits that, on the face of it sound pretty trivial, but there's so much back-end infrastructure that needs to go in. But I wouldn't be doing anything else. I love this stuff. Software engineering, it's amazing. So let's go to the next page. So yeah, that's the SureVoIP app. Early days, mentally hard to get where it is. Fantastic ride. Can't complain. You don't do stuff that is easy. All the good stuff in life is hard. Um, I'm really looking forward to next year and where we take this. It's all our own intellectual property. All the right bits are open sourced. There's parts of most applications that you just shouldn't write yourself or have closed. Um, I just really look forward to where this is going and what we're going to do over the next few years. And I'd really love you guys to try it out. The core, if you download the TADSummit user agent, it's got all the background push code in there. You can effectively just run it on your phone, put in your own SIP servers details as long as you support SIP over WebSockets. And off you trot, you've got a full app. That's the easy bit. The hard bit is the OAuth 2, the authentication, the provisioning, the error reporting, the user feedback. The SIP part is probably 5% of it, to be honest. The rest is building a production enterprise grade unified communications app, getting it looking right on iPads, web. It's all there out for you. You just need to have the drive and the want to do it. That's me, Gavin Henry of SureVoIP. I hope you can take something away from this. I hope you'll listen to some of the podcast shows that I've done, and they'll help you. I look forward to see you and on the GitHub stuff. Thanks.